Hello, State Senator Rob Sampson here. Today I'm with you to discuss my opponent's latest campaign mailer, which says, "The choice is clear," which is kind of interesting because he made me the clear person, not the color photo. But what I really want to talk about is what is on the inside of this mailer, and aside from the fact that he calls me a career politician and a bunch of other things, which I think are somewhat unfair. He has 3 points that he is making. The first one says Sampson irresponsibly called for reopening businesses in April, while over 100 Connecticut residents were dying from COVID-19 each day and before adequate testing capacity was in place. And he references the Todd Feinberg radio show from June 11th, 20. So I don't know what a radio show in June 11th has to do with what I said in April. But at any rate, I will give him one Pinocchio or one pants on fire for that one because it's partially true. Although I never actually called for businesses to be open. What I have said is that we are free citizens in America, and really it's up to individuals to decide whether or not their business should be open and whether or not we want to patronize those businesses. And more important than that, really, is I've simply called into question the governor's decision to determine some businesses as being essential and other ones as non-essential in a very arbitrary manner. And people who have been following me in this issue for a while know that what I'm saying is absolutely true. To me, it's hard to say that the liquor store or the Target should be open, the dollar store, while simultaneously you are saying that the businesses that were right next door, a little mom and pop shop, for instance, or a dress store that gets a few customers a day and can certainly follow the same protocol as those more, the larger department stores. What's the difference and why should they be closed? You know about the debacle with the hair salons where hair salons were going to be open and then they were closed and then it was okay to use hair dryers and then not. It's been clear since the beginning that the Lamont administration has been somewhat arbitrary in the way they come up with these decisions and not basing them on science. And one of my most important roles as a state senator is to represent my neighbors. And I believe that they should be able to make their own decisions about what they need to do to open safely and use precautions. And I believe their customers should be able to make their decision about whether or not they feel comfortable patronizing those businesses and whether or not they've actually lived up to those expectations. That's not to say we shouldn't have the Department of Public Health or our local health district involved in the case of restaurants and things, and we should. We have that normally, and I'm just saying it should continue. So I'll give him one Pinocchio because he's kind of stretching the truth. I would never say anyone should be closed or anyone should be open. What I advocate for is freedom. The second one, I've already addressed, actually. This says Sampson was the only state senator who voted to protect prescription drug companies, which is completely and utterly false. When he opposed capping the price of life-saving drugs like insulin, forcing Connecticut residents to pay more. And he references the proper bill in this case, at least, House Bill 6003 from the special session this past July 28th. This bill was before the Connecticut General Assembly because President Trump passed several executive orders to fight the cost of prescription drugs. Things that will actually do things and actually affect the cost of the drugs themselves. And Democrats in Connecticut, actually, despite the fact that they've given all the power to the governor to run the state, wanted to go into special session to pass some political bills to promote themselves for the upcoming election. And this is one of the ones that they did, this insulin bill. The problem is that my opponent mischaracterizes what this bill is and what it does. First off, it does not cap the price of life-saving drugs. This bill caps the copay for insulin for people who have high deductible health plans. And you might say that's a good thing. And it's not a terrible thing by any means. It's a good policy, except for the fact that this bill was very poorly written. It has no means testing, so it applies to the poorest person and the richest person as long as they have a high deductible health plan, which will effectively drive up the rates of insurance for every single person because we're all paying for that new lowered copay. And most people that have diabetes and use insulin that are on a high deductible health plan, they meet their deductible. The only difference that will occur from this bill is that people end up meeting their deductible a month later in the year. And the end result for everyone else is that we will pay for higher insurance. Maybe more importantly is that the idea that the people that voted for this bill were somehow being compassionate that couldn't be farther from the truth, because this bill does absolutely nothing to address people who do not have insurance coverage at all. And finally, with regard to the cost of insulin, this bill actually prevents insurance companies from being able to negotiate the actual price of insulin, because now, once the law establishes that there is going to be a copay that cannot be exceeded, there's no incentive or ability for the insurance company to even negotiate the price of the drug itself. I'm going to share a link to my floor speech that I gave when this bill was before us, and also I will share the response that I made to my opponent when he first attacked me on this issue a little over a month ago. And then finally, and the most important reason why I'm here today with you, is the last item, which is Sampson is Eversource's chief defender in the legislature, calling their rate hikes justified and refusing to hold the corporation accountable while thousands went without power for weeks. That is absolutely 100% untrue, and I challenge my opponent to find where I said any of these things. I have been the most consistent person in the entire General Assembly opposing bills that would cause the increase in utility rates, particularly electricity. I have a perfect record, as a matter of fact. Senate Bill 9 in 2018 was the most recent bill that jacked up our electric rates, and I go into a great deal about it in other things that I've written over the last several recent months. Back when our bills went up in July, I came out and asked to hold Eversource accountable. In fact, if I said anything that could be construed as what my opponent is claiming, it's that I said that while I hold Eversource accountable, and they're certainly not suffering, and their executives are making a lot of money off the backs of ratepayers in Connecticut, who's really responsible, 75-25, I think I said, is the Connecticut General Assembly, who's created the policy that allows it to happen. But there is no way that I could ever be considered the Eversource's chief defender in the legislature. I also went in just this past week and voted for the Take Back the Grid Act, and I will share the speech that I made on the floor before I ever knew this was coming, where I go after Eversource's executives in that bit also, because my focus is to be fair. And when the legislature makes bad policy that forces a company like Eversource to raise rates, I will blame them before I will blame Eversource. But Eversource is deserving a lot of blame also, and I've never shied away from that. And for my opponent to send this piece of mail out, particularly to senior citizens who are in great numbers voting by absentee ballots, and to time this on the exact few days when people are going to be receiving their absentee ballots and sending them in, is very disingenuous, and I'm disappointed that he chose to make up and completely fabricate this statement. I also want to point out that he has a footnote here for this item also, which says, Senator Sampson on Eversource, July special session, House Bill 6001. But if you go look up House Bill 6001, this was a bill that passed the legislature unanimously on the subject of telemedicine, something about letting doctors, bill patients for Zoom doctor's visits. That has nothing to do with Eversource or electricity rates, and it's shocking to me that you would put a footnote that is completely unrelated to the tremendously false claim you would make about your opponent. That's all I want to say about this mailer. I do want to just close by saying that you will never, ever see a piece of mail like this from me. You will only see from me things about my record, what I believe in, what my values are, what I have voted for, why I believe what I do, and what my plan is to improve Connecticut and the lives of our neighbors in the future. That's all you will ever see. And in the past, if you've seen me do any sort of mail that compares myself and my opponent, it's always been very honest, forthright, and about policy. And I've always described my opponent's record in a way that they would agree with, because I do not believe I have to distort the facts or mislead anyone to win an election. I believe that if you compare my record and my value system versus my opponent, they will choose me every time. And that gives me the confidence to run a clean race, which I always will, and I will never lower myself to doing something like this. And I hope people are wise enough to research. I hope that enough people get to see this video and make smart decisions about who they vote for in this election cycle. And with that, I want to thank you very much for taking the time to watch this, and please pass it on to your friends and neighbors so that we can have a fair election based on what's really true and not phony mail like this. Thank you very much.